morning.
Are we on? Morning, everyone, and welcome to the virtual Zoom gathering of Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Still making progress here in the sanctuary, but sadly the COVID numbers are making progress in the wrong direction, so we are not meeting in person again this week, but we are here in the sanctuary. It's myself, Tyler, and Barbara, and we're going to do our best to bring you a nice service this morning. But now to enter the spirit of worship, let us calm our minds and our hearts, and of course pray. Good morning, Barbara.
Did what? They laid out of the hospital.
Good morning. I will be playing something that's different than what is in your order of service because I switched it to better fit with Professor Amber's talk today. And this is music of William Grant Still from 1935. Still was considered to be part of the Harlem Renaissance. And this is Slumberland, which is this conception of heaven.
Thank you, Barbara. And welcome again to the Sunday morning virtual worship service of Summit UU Fellowship. Summit is a liberal religious community bound together by shared principles that are drawn from world religions, humanist teachings, nature and science, philosophy, and our own personal practices. We are a religion of love and inclusion, and the mission of Summit is to commit ourselves to building a more compassionate, just, and sustainable world. As we always do, we would like to acknowledge that our fellowship resides on yet unceded Kumeyaay land, and that for more than 10,000 years, this land has been and continues to be the home to the Kumeyaay people. We recognize the violent history and honor the legacy of the continuing presence of the Kumeyaay people. We don't have any real announcements this morning to make, but I would like to welcome Professor Chuck Ambers to our pulpit this morning. I'd first like to thank Doug Kay for helping facilitate Chuck to speak to us this morning. Chuck and Doug have been friends for over 50 years, first as friends and as roommates, and their bond has covered various educational endeavors, including annual projects and an educational curriculum, and they co-authored Sharing the Earth of 1978, a curriculum guide that had been used in over 20 states. Professor Ambrose earned his bachelor's degree from Cal Western in 1967 and his master's in education from United International University in 1978. He's been a multicultural bilingual instructor in Chula Vista School District, where he has taught 4th, 5th, and 6th grade students. He's also taught at the Museum of Natural History. He's presently an adjunct professor at Mesa and Palomar Colleges, where he teaches American history from an African-American perspective and African world history. Professor Chuck is the present owner and educational curator of the African Diaspora Museum in Old Town. Chuck has numerous television appearances at museums and universities and libraries throughout the United States and various countries. And Doug wanted me to add a particular side note that Professor Chuck was an outstanding athlete, and we certainly welcome him this morning. To begin our service, I'd like to light our chalice. So if Barbara could come up and help me with the lighting part, I'll read our chalice lighting words. Thanks, Barbara. We light this chalice, remembering and honoring our own tradition and celebrating the rich diversity of traditions among us. As we search for justice, meaning, and purpose, may we remember that justice, meaning, and purpose live first in deeply listening to one another. And now if you will join me while muted as we sing our UU hymn.
Bajo el gran sol, sur esperanza, fe, amor, verdad y belleza cantando de cada tierra, cada voz.
From all who dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue.
And please join me, while still muted, with our UU aspiration. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. This morning's order of service is slightly out of order, so we're going to go a little rogue, and instead of doing the reading, we're going to go directly into Time for All Ages and welcome Mary Carter Vale, who is freshly home from camp.
Yes, I am freshly home from camp. All right, I have to get this so I can see myself. I am freshly home from camp and freshly home from General Assembly. So it's been a busy, busy 3 weeks for me. And I want to talk to you about camp, but first I want to let y'all know that we're starting our summer program in the parking lot today, which is going to be, I'm calling it Explore, Wonder, and Play Together, where families are invited to come play. And today we're going to be Wonder Wizards as we explore the pH response, testing blue pea flower, butterfly pea flower tea, which is a natural blue tea that changes colors when you add anything acidic or alkaline to it. So we're going to play with that today. So I hope folks will come and join us at noon in the parking lot. So to start, I'm going to light my little chalice. This is a chalice that I use when I'm up at camp. And this is a piece of wood from camp and a shell that I found in the, what we call the room requirement, or the craft closet. And I don't think you can really see it, but that's a rainbow tea light. And that's what we use when we're up at camp. So for those of you that don't know, Camp de Benneville Pines, let me put on my camp hat, is up in the mountains, San Bernardino Mountains, and it is our UU camp. And for the last 2.5 years, we haven't been able to meet up there for 2 reasons. First, pandemic. These are old cabins and old buildings, and they don't have good circulatory systems for the pandemic situation. So for the first summer of 2020, we couldn't meet. Everything was shut down. And then there was this big fire, the El Dorado fire you might have heard of. It was a fire that started, I'm not sure if it was, I think it was further east than Redlands, but it swept right up that hill, came right behind the camp, like the trees right behind the cabins. You can see where the fire line was very, very close. And the camp was saved by a hotshot team that came in there, and they said, hey, we can save this camp, because the volunteers had done such a good job of abating future fire risk by removing a lot of the dried kindling and such. So we had and then that summer after the fire, there were mudslides that naturally follow fire. So fortunately, the camp had done a really good job of preventing the mud from doing any damage, although they did a significant amount of mud in the bathrooms. So that wouldn't have worked for camp. So this summer this is our very first elementary camp, and I want to show you this picture. Look at all these campers. It's kind of blurring on the camera, but there were 33 elementary campers and 6 CITs, and then a staff that supported that of youth and young adult counselors and adult program staff. And it was very interesting this year. It was different. It was different. When we got there, we all had to do rapid COVID tests. And then we wore masks inside all the time. Anytime we were inside, we wore masks, except for when we were sleeping in our rooms. And we ate outside. So everything was, I called it Camp Al Fresco, because everything was outside. So we had much more outside time, which was really nice. It started to get a little warm towards the end of the week, but not as warm as it does down here. So we really could be outside. And midweek, we tested the entire camp from the youngest 2nd grader all the way to the adult staff. And the nurse was shocked when all 65 of us were COVID free. So I thought we did a really good job. And I tested this morning and I'm still COVID free. So I'm very happy about that. One of the things we did notice though, these are pandemic kids, you know? And I don't know about any of our kids here, but any families will probably know that the kids, you know, you guys were all going to school and then suddenly you had to stay home for at least a year, if not 2. And a lot of the socializing and social development that normally has been our norm has been disrupted. So there was a lot more need from the kids to sort of be more attached to the counselors and not as much to their peers. And that we watched the attachments to each other sort of build over the week. And by the end of the week, they were doing much better. But it was very interesting to witness that. So, and also the counselors, especially the older ones, were mourning the loss of 2 years of camp for them because their senior high camp experience had been disrupted. So there's a lot of healing that was happening. And then also there was some sadness that we were holding at the same time. So it was a lot. It was a big week that way. And then I wanted to show you this was my cohort. You can see me in orange. This is 4th of July. I wore orange for Indigenous people. And my partner, Melinda, has a t-shirt that says, girls just want to have fundamental rights. that was our 4th of July outfit. And then these 6 amazing young people were our counselors in training. We had 3 female counselor in training and 2 non-gender conforming counselors in training. And so next week for middle school camp, we will have our first gender non-conforming cabin for middle school camp. So non-binary kids or any kids who identify in the trans spectrum can have that choice for a cabin, which is really fantastic, giving them the space that they need to be who they are. So after this whole 2.5 years of pandemic experience, being out in the pines, being in the trees, being in the fresh air, looking at the stars at night, being together seemed to be just the balm that all of these children needed, and the counselors and the adult staff. It was really a very good experience, even though we had a lot of muscles that had been unexercised for a long time. So we were starting to rebuild those camp muscles, if you will. And yeah, I had a really good time, and I'll be going up again on Saturday for senior high camp. We had 1 summit child there this week. Claudia Benega's youngest child was at this week's camp and her older child will be at the camp that's starting today, which is middle school camp. And I'll be back up there at senior high camp. We don't have our big group of senior hires that we used to have. Many of them have circled on to become young adults, and our new incoming high schoolers aren't as active. So I hope that we can get folks from Summit back up to camp, because it's such a special place and so much growth happens up there. So I just wanted to share what's going on in the return to camp, and that it's really needed. We live into all 8 of our principles when we're in that space. So thank you for listening, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what Professor Embers has to share with us today as well. So thank you.
This morning's brief reading comes from W.E.B. Du Bois. When Eleanor first sent it to me, I read it as a short treatise on doing what's right at the right time, but as a procrastinator, I read it as a procrastinator. So now is the accepted time, not tomorrow, not some more convenient season. It is today that our best work can be done, and not some future day or future year. Today is the seed time. Now are the hours of work, and tomorrow comes the harvest and the playtime. Summit is a fellowship that continues to be supported entirely by the voluntary generosity of its members and friends, and we gratefully appreciate our faithful pledgers who continue to keep up their monthly contributions. We make it easier than ever to donate to our virtual plate on Sunday mornings. The link can be found in the chat box, and I will take you directly to the donation location. And we will gratefully accept your donations while we listen to this morning's musical interlude. Barbara?
So again, I'm off what I had said I was going to play. This is music of 87-year-old Valerie Capers, who lives in New York City and is a pianist and composer. And she was the first blind graduate of the Juilliard School, got both her bachelor's and her master's, and is African American, and has brought in her, the jazz is a big part of her musical life. And this is from a set called Portraits in Jazz. And the first one is called Ella Scott's The Little Lamb, Portrait of Ella Fitzgerald. Second one is a tribute to Jelly Roll Morton. And the third one, it's Billie Holiday. It's called Billie's Song.
Everyone, I'd like to introduce again Professor Chuck Ambers.
Yes, and Josh, let me share before I start. In the middle of my screen, there's a sign that says this meeting is being recorded by the host. And down at the bottom, there's a blue box that says got it. Do I click on that?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Okay, thank you folks at Summit for the invitation, and particularly to Judge Doug Kay. And before I get started, I'd like to introduce you to some of my staff. These are my reenactors that go along with my 12 exhibits. And we just performed up at Julian for the 4th of July last Monday. It's the 17th out of 18 years that we've been in the parade as the Julian African-American pioneers. So we will be meeting some of them this morning. And so I'd like to say thank you for the invitation. To start, I'm going to start with the African Spanish, African Mexican presence in San Diego. But in order to do that, I got to take you to Spain, where the Moors controlled Spain for 750 years, from 711 until the spring of 1492. And about 80% of them were indigenous Black Africans of Islamic faith. And this is the Grand Palace of Alhambra in Granada, Spain. The background that you see is what you call Spanish architecture, but it is really Moorish math. And it's part of the academics that the Moors left in Spain for 750 years. And that's why Southern Europeans are quite often darker with curly hair and brown eyes. And they get a similar blood disease. And their DNA we can identify as African. So this is what some of those soldiers, the Moors, look like on the horses, you know, from the Kentucky Derby, Pimlico Racetrack, all of those Arabian stallions. And so with that in mind, I would like to talk about coming into San Diego with Juan Cabrillo Spaniards on his ship, African Spanish, with De Portola on an expedition coming up to the desert, the mountains, and over the mountains into historical Old Town. You had people of African descent, and I'm going to talk about one of the most prominent ones, and that is Governor Pio Pico. He was the last governor of California under Mexican control, and this is what I looked like when I brought him to life in the state park about 25 years ago when I had dark hair. His birthday is on the 5th of May. We don't celebrate Cinco de Mayo, we celebrate Cinco de Pico, because he was the last governor of California under Mexican control, and he signed a treaty to give California to the United States when the border crossed the Mexicans didn't cross the border. That's what I looked like some 25 years ago when I had dark hair. And this is what I look like today when I bring the governor to life in the tuxedo and the top hat and everything. And so we are reenactors that live this history, and it goes on and on and on. So San Diego was the first place that the Spaniards landed. And with De Portola and his group, they built a fort up on top of the mountain, on top of Presidio Park, because some of them messed with the wrong Native Americans. The women and the men kicked their butt and chased them up the hill. So the first fort was up on top of what we call the Presidio Park, and that was the first mission right there in San Diego. If you track the missions from San Diego to Oceanside, to Capistrano, to Los Angeles, all the way up, you have people of mixed African descent, African Spanish, African Mexican in that group. And so here are the founders of Los Angeles. In 1781, 44 people founded the City of the Angels. And 26 of the 44, 25 of the 26 were of mixed African descent. So we talk about people of African descent in San Diego going all the way back to the Moors, to the Spaniards. And now I'm going to talk about the first African Americans in the San Diego area. And this is an anthology, 75,000 pages of books and information about the first African-American pioneer in San Diego to own a 160-acre homestead on top of the Palomar Mountain. His name was Nate Harrison. And this is what he looked like. And this is a exhibit of his artifacts on top of the Palomar Mountain. And Doug will tell you that he and I hiked down the Palomar Mountain, the side, and we fished in a stream called from Dome Pond up on top of the mountain at the 6th grade camp. And we caught fish and stayed overnight right there near Nate Harrison's cabin. And so this is what I look like when I bring Nate Harrison to life. In my Biv Raw 6-gun rattlesnake boots and red underwear. So that was one of the characters that we had in the junior parade because he was the first. He was the most popular African-American in this county. And he probably has more pictures of him in San Diego County than any other person because he welcomed the stagecoach that came from Arizona to the backcountry of Julian, Ramona, and he watered the horses coming up the hill. And he ended up in the early 1900s providing water for the Model T Fords that overheated coming up the hill. So he has more pictures in the San Diego County than any other person, including some of the founders of Babcock with the Coronado Hotel and all of those other famous European Americans in San Diego's history. And this is my pioneers in the Julian Parade. The ribbon comes from the parade on the 4th of July, and these are some of the reenactors. Fred Coleman, the first person to find gold in San Diego, started the second largest gold rush. He married a Native American woman, Kumeyaay, and had 11 Black Indian children. Albert and Margaret Robinson, they built a restaurant, did so well with the restaurant serving meals and apple pies, they tore it down and built a hotel called the Hotel Robinson, which is now the famous Julian Hotel. And here is America Newton, a washwoman, who earned 80 acres of land by washing clothes for the miners and putting them out on the bushes. And so this is a very good picture of Albert and Margaret Robinson, some of the pioneers, very upstanding citizens in Julian. And if you need it, we have the books. I never do any lectures or anything without all the academics. So these are books that I sell at the museum. It's called Last Known Address, and it deals with the Julian Cemetery. And your last known address might be your headstone in the cemetery, where we talk about Albert and Margaret Robinson, America Newton, and some of the famous people that were up there. Of the 55 people in the San Diego County, African Americans in 1870, 38 of them lived in the backcountry because they could get a 160-acre homestead. So why would they want to live in San Diego, although California was a free state? It was a segregated state in the 1850s. And so rather than live as second-class citizens in San Diego, you had a lot of African Americans that qualified for a 160-acre homestead back in the backcountry. Julian was the center of it. And so from some of these booklets that we have from the San Diego History Center in Old Town, you can get booklets like this from the San Diego History Center in Balboa Park. And it talks about some of these people, legendary people that's in San Diego that was part of the downtown San Diego. This is the Hudgens family from Coronado. They had property in Coronado, and we talked about not just Coronado, but downtown San Diego with the Hotel Robinson. And let's do a flashback to Julian. This is the famous restaurant that the Margaret and Albert Robinson built. You see the staircase? That is the same staircase that when they tore the restaurant down and built their hotel, it's the same staircase. So this is some of that history that we have pictures of throughout San Diego, pioneers, and I'll pull a few more. Downtown San Diego, the Acme Social Club on the boat in the bay. And if they put one more person on that boat, it might sink. And so we had some prominent, affluent African Americans. And here is the famous fire station on Ocean View Boulevard, by the first African American fire station and firefighters. But in reality, if your house is on fire, would you care what color the hands are that brought the hose to put out the fire? That's how silly segregation was back in those days. And so we talk about some of this development that has happened in San Diego, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So some of the people and what the people look like back in those days. Ladies and gentlemen, yes. And so we talk about other parts of San Diego, not only downtown San Diego, but let's go to La Jolla. The booklet says African American Pioneers in La Jolla, going back to the 1880s. This is a booklet that we share, and this is one of the streets in La Jolla. The only African American street named after Congressman Scott Peters allowed me to do the unveiling of this street sign that's called Mabel Bell Lane. And it's the only street sign in San Diego, in La Jolla, named after an African American. But you had many citizens that lived in La Jolla. And so this right here is Mabel Bell, one of the prominent citizens of African descent in San Diego, African American. And Scott Peters, the congressman in La Jolla, was nice enough to let me remove the paper off the first and only African American street sign in La Jolla, Mabel Bell Lane. And so we talk about it. You had a church in La Jolla right there next to Bishop Private School. It was called the Church on the Coast. It was right there behind the school at Bishop's Private School. And that school was so prominent that it cost you about the same amount to go to Bishop's Private School for a year as it does to UCSD today. And so with that, we're going to go from San Diego to the back country. Camp Hope, Camp Lockett, the last dress-mounted horse parade of any horse soldiers in the San Diego area, but in the United States military. Can I say that again? The famous 10th Cavalry, November 1843, 1,000 horses and 800 men. The booklet talks to the legacy of the famous 10th Cavalry. 1 out of every 5 cowboy in the West was an African American. 1 out of every 5 cowboy in the West was a Mexican vaquero. Come in. So 2/5 of the West did not look like John Wayne, Gary Cooper, Kevin Costner, and Clint Eastwood. They were indigenous like Africans. And one of them was a singing cowboy called Herb Jeffries. He was a baritone with the Duke Ellington Orchestra, but he was a black cowboy, singing cowboy. And so this is a horse and the love that you had to take care of your horses. This is a famous stone store, 2-story building right there by the railroad track. And it was the home base for the little museum that they had up in Campo for a while. And as I said, 1,000 horses and 800 men. And why did you have more horses than men? Because they had machine guns, a machine gunnery. And 2 machine gunners, one would have a horse, the other would have a horse, and the third horse would carry the machine gun. So in 1943, you had the last dress-mounted horse parade. The video can be seen from PBS and from some of the TV stations like Ken Kramer and everything. Yes. And now let me, I don't know how many of you might be somewhere in the vintage age, but this was a gentleman that you might have known. His name is Joe Louis. And not only did he do lectures, but he did boxing exhibitions up in the Campo area for the soldiers. And here is an envelope with the famous Buffalo Soldier stamp on it from Campo. We have 137 stamps and 31 coins with African Americans on them. I sell the first day covers that cover 17 different locations where the Buffalo Soldiers served around the United States. And this is a cancel stamp. So come and see us at Old Town. We're at 2471 Congress Street in historical Old Town, 1 block behind Old Town Mexican Cafe and Cafe Coyote. We are open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday from 12 noon until about 7 o'clock. And you can come through with your tours individually, or we can do group tours up to about 25 people. We have 4 sections of the museum: African Marketplace, an Africa room going back 6,000 years, a Latin America room going back 3,000 years with Mexico, Cuba, Brazil, Haiti, Venezuela. And then we have a 500-year room with African American pioneers in San Diego, coins and stamps, and also some of the documentation on sports and things for the people. With that, I think I'm done, unless we have some questions. I don't know what's my time. I'm trying to stay under my 15 to 20 minutes at the most. And so with that, I'm going to invite you to Old Town African Diaspora Museum and Research Center with 7,000 books in 9 languages. And Josh, you need to tell me if I have any questions or anything.
Well, if you could stick around, we just have a little bit more of our service, and then we do a little community gathering where we can all ask questions and have a conversation. So we hope you can stick around for just a few more minutes.
Fantastic.
Right.
And thank you again for the invitation.
Well, thank you again for being with us. Let's continue on with our service with our final song. Thanks, Tyler.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
All right, fantastic.
We are our grandmother's prayers.
As we close our service by extinguishing our chalice, I just want to invite everyone again to stay afterward for time of community gathering with Professor Chuck. Also, I want to invite you back for next week when Robin Mitchell from San Diego UU will be speaking to us. So join us then. Our closing words. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in mindless oblivion. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go without challenging yourself or others. When I say go in peace, I don't mean go in utter ease and comfort. When I say go in peace, I mean go in peace seeking justice. I mean go in peace committed to equal rights and opportunities for all. When I say go in peace, I mean go in the peace that is created when together we build communities of true solidarity, deep compassion, and fierce, unrelenting love. Go in peace.